Welcome to Bespoken Bones with your host, Parvani Moray, connecting ancestors, sex, magic, and science. Parvani explores transpersonal tools for erotic wellness every new and full moon, engaging educators, healers, spiritual leaders, and scientists in revolutionary dialogue. Get ready to feel good and go deep. This is Bespoken Bones.
Hi, and welcome to Bespoken Bones, ancestors at the crossroads of sex, magic, and science. We're in the business of healing trauma, connecting with our roots, and developing radiant erotic wellness in past, present, and future generations. And I'm your host, Parvani Moray, and it's such a privilege and a delight and an honor to introduce you today to Stargazer Li. And Li is known for eloquently conversing with the universe. Through sharing stories under the stars, her cosmic updates and much-loved podcast tell the unfolding story of these transformational times, and her deliciously potent essence elixirs, she continually invites us to meet this moment well. And Li is dedicated to ancestor tracking, to researching and getting to know ancestral people, places, and times as a foundational pathway to becoming human. And you can find out much more about her and her potions and her classes and all the goodness that she brings into the world at her website, which is stargazerli.com. I'm going to spell it stargazerli.com. So it's Stargazer Li, but Li is spelled Li.com. So Li, welcome to Bespoken Bones.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, this has been a conversation a long time in the making, and I'm going to just dive in by asking you to tell a story about how do you know your ancestors are real? Because I know, like white folks in North America were not acculturated to believing in our ancestors. And so there's always this question, like, how do I know this is real? And so great, let's dive into that question. Can you share a story about that?
Gosh, there are so many ways that they are real and to answer that question. And two come to mind right off. So I think I'm going to speak to them both because I think all of this is many layered. Like, what is real? Right? I mean, is the first question. And I think that ironically, I think tracking our ancestors is about us becoming more real. And to me, it's really been like through ancestor tracking, like through doing research and finding records, that tell the story of people's lives so that I could really track from person to person. And it's definitely also, finding the places and the culture, but it's like really remembering and honoring the person by gathering as much information that I can about their life and then really reading my way into the story, like of what they experienced. And what I experience when I do that is that I can feel that ancestor, like as a presence. And I could feel like who was like not somebody I'd want to know. And, and who was really kind. And like they actually, like each family and each person really has a very distinct essence or vibe to them. And I just did an ancestor tracking session with somebody yesterday, where we spent a few hours, tracking 3 different of their lines, and the feeling, like as we worked our way back and in, like you could just feel that family and that line. And so I think this is so important because it's by acknowledging their realness, like of the lives that they lived, is a pathway and opening to them. But I think then we start to become more real, because we're actually acknowledging the people and the places and the experiences that we are literally made of.
It's interesting to me because you're talking a lot about place, right? And I sometimes I hear that in the ancestor conversation, but often it's, I think maybe because of spiritual orphanhood or because people are so diasporic, it's just like that. I'm curious of like, how are you weaving place into your ancestor practice, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think we are definitely displaced people, right? And so not only do we not have ancestors, but we don't have our ancestral relationship with the land. And so we don't know how to be on this earth. And how I've done this is, as I've gotten to know my ancestors, and there'll be the name of a place, and so I'll first off I'll go look on a map, because I don't know where that place is. Our sense of geography is so like, okay, yeah, New York is kind of somewhere over there, or whatever. But I'll go and I'll look at map. Oh, this is near this, and then I always look like, what are the rivers nearby? What are the mountains nearby? And I'll give just one story on my father's side. They come from what's now Baden, Germany. It wasn't even Germany when they left. It was more Prussia and Baden. But it's this area kind of south of what's now Heidelberg. That's this valley. It's called the Neckar Valley, and the Neckar River goes through it right now. And I found it's called the Krakau. And again, you know how it's like, if you live in a city, like you never see, like on the maps, it won't say like this district or whatever. You just know that that's what it's called, right? Because you live there. And so that's kind of how this valley in this area was. And to just get that sense of like, oh, this was a valley. This was like the breadbasket where like food was grown, in this area, grapes were grown. It's like to start to get a sense of literally what they were made of, right? The water they drank, the soil and the minerals that were there, what kind of food grew there. And then what I did is I actually followed that river, like until where it kind of connected with the Main, and followed that up into the hills and into the mountains to its source. And when I found this, when I traced this back, I ultimately found this place up in these hills. It's kind of where like Germany, France, Italy, and Switzerland meet. And, but especially kind of Italy, Switzerland, and Germany. And it's within a mile of each other are the sources of the Danube and the Rhine rivers. And so it's like this continental divide. And I discovered this just by like following, like, where did their water come from that they drank? And at that place, like right in that vicinity of this coming together, the headwaters of the two major rivers that head east and west, that my peoples and many of our peoples, European peoples, traveled and migrated along. There's the largest Celtic grave mound that's been found. And the people buried in that grave mound were buried in the patterns of different constellations of the stars. And so by letting place be a part of ancestor tracking, of following the rivers, then another layer of realness came. It's like, okay, my people, like these were the waters came from this place. The DNA on my father's side is like at the most minute level is Italo-Alpine Celt. And so I know that even though they ended up living in what's called Germany, they weren't of the Germanic people so much as the Italo-Alpine Celts that would have probably been related to this grave mound and this area.
That's profound to me. I remember when I started teaching, and I was park ranger, and I was going into various elementary schools and teaching about environmental education. And I remember asking the kids, "Oh, like, what do you like to eat?" And this kid said, "Oh, I like to eat tomatoes." And I said, "Oh, where do they come from?" And he said, "Oh, they come from the grocery store." Right. And I think about it like in what you're saying of, I've never thought about where my water comes from, right? And how, like, it's like we are the lands on which we live, right? We're made of the water, we're made of the earth. And then we carry that we carry the homeland in our DNA, of course. Yeah. And we're also, deeply, obviously made of the water and the earth from where we're living.
Yeah.
And it seems like both of those place in both of those ways, like the homeland place as well as the current place, are worthy of, that intimate, like, exploration, I guess, is what comes, right?
Yeah.
Of really understanding where your water comes from.
Yeah. And I mean, our ancestral peoples didn't have their water piped in. Like, they knew where their water came from,
Right.
and they had intimate relationships with those waters. And even, there's like a persistence of the names of rivers, for earlier peoples of places, because not always, but in many places, those names are more ancient, and a lot of linguistic research has even done on the names of rivers and mountains because of such deep, intimate relationships. I mean, people depended upon the water for survival, right? And so, they migrated along those waters. Similarly, in Northwest Siberia, where I believe some of my matrilineal kind of oldest level mitochondrial DNA comes from. There are rivers that they flow north, from south to north there. And the people until very recently have been both Caucasian and Mongoloid peoples, and mixed. Tribal nomadic peoples, shamanic peoples have migrated up and down those rivers, and their kind of greatest deity is the white water bird, that flies, and it brings kind of births and also in deaths. And it parallels Cygnus the swan constellation in the sky that flies along the Milky Way, and in certain positions is flying on that north-south axis, right? And so it's like the one who watches over. And so it's like there's this way that people are living inside of a story, right? And that story is happening here on Earth, and it's happening in the sky. And waters are a huge part of that, as well as the comings and goings of us as people, as well as our migrations.
Like migration being the meta of the river.
Exactly. Right. They're nomadic peoples. I mean, in earlier layers, I'm like super geeky about the Paleolithic. I just feel really more and more and more connected to kind of a much earlier time before empire and civilization and how people lived. Because I think a lot of the old stories that remain are from that time. But people were nomadic, they lived in smaller groups. And they moved, you couldn't just stay in one place and not use up all the resources, right? And so where did people move? They tended to migrate, along the waters or from water to water. And so in particular in that Northwest Siberia, that migration, in different seasons, just like the birds are migrating in different seasons.
What's striking me is I think I have, and I think many of us have, this idea of being displaced, right? Of not having a home, not having roots in the land in which we're living, at least, for folks here in North America, many folks. But what I'm tapping into as you're speaking is that idea might actually be flawed, right? Because if you're talking about people who were migrating, not just maybe seasonally, but they were migrating with the ice ages, they were migrating, right? There was the migration, movement of humanity has always happened. People have always moved from land to land. And so maybe this idea of this orphanhood is flawed in some way. Am I getting it?
I think so. I mean, I think it's not so much that it's flawed. I think it's particularly psychological. I think we're psychic orphans, but the earth didn't go anywhere and the cosmos didn't go anywhere. We're still on the earth. We're still in the cosmos. And that's a part of what I mean by becoming real humans, A lot of times I'm teaching stargazing, we're out under the stars, which again, hardly anybody does. And so it's such an epic, mind-blowing experience. And one of the things I do is tell, stories of different stars and constellations and different times and places. And what I talk about is it's like we're looking for stories, like we're looking, what are the myths, that we live. And again, we want somehow to like use them, so that we could be a part of something or have something. And, my sense is that the myths are not made by humans. They're not like stories made up by humans. They're stories that the universe is telling, that humans have learned to read and to tell. And in the seeing and reading and telling and speaking and seeing and experiencing ourselves woven within the story, this is how we become human.
Just curious if there's one that's coming to mind to share.
Well, there's, I've been reading lately about the stories that have to do with kind of the path of where people go when they die. And there's some interesting commonalities between stories of kind of Northeastern Native American peoples and people in Egypt and the Baltic, so seemingly really, really different cultures, right? And the thought is that those commonalities are there because those mythologies came from the Paleolithic, from before those peoples moved out to those different places and spread into different cultures. And so this one, it's not so much a story as kind of like a pathway, and it has to do with when Orion is setting in the west. And if you know Orion at all, there's like 3 stars that are the belt of Orion.
My son is named after this constellation.
Okay, right. So you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And then down from there, there's kind of a star kind of off the thumb, and then there's a little fuzzy that's actually the Orion Nebula, but that you can see with the naked eye. And so in many cultures, again, kind of, shared across very diverse, even continents, this is seen as a hand. So like the 3 stars of Orion's belt would be like at the wrist, and then the hand is pointing down. And the Orion Nebula would be the eye in the hand, in the palm of the hand. And you might have seen that motif before, right? An eye in the palm of a hand. And so the story in many cultures has to do with when this is touching the horizon, that the souls of those who've died can kind of move up kind of through that eye, if you will, and hand. And just above Orion is the faint part of the Milky Way. And that they can travel from there and get onto the Milky Way, which in many cultures, the stars of the Milky Way are the stars of our ancestors and where people go when they pass. And then that it's said that the souls travel this Milky Way kind of as a river, if you will, or a path kind of toward the north. They go all the way around until they get to the stars of Cygnus the swan. That is a swan in some cultures. In others, it's some sort of a raptor, but it tends to be a bird. And then right there where Cygnus is, as we head toward the center of the galaxy, it's like the Milky Way splits in 2, and there's called the dark rift. And so there's kind of like one branch that's kind of more bright and another branch not quite as bright. And in between them, it's more dark. And that's kind of the ooey gooey center of our galaxy, if you will. It's like so dense that it's not lit up, right? And so the story is that then the soul kind of reaches Deneb, which is the tail star of Cygnus the swan, or in some it would be the eye of a bird. And that becomes kind of the judge or the challenge of the soul. And then once you pass that, you kind of either go to, be reunited with your ancestors. You essentially become an ancestor. Or you go kind of into this more amorphous path, and which actually the path that the planets travel goes through. And so some think then you go and you live another life. And so there are qualities of this motif that are shared across many, many cultures. And it's thought that this goes back to, tens of thousands of years ago, when we had this way of living inside of the story of what's happening with the movements, the migrations, right, of the stars, right? And they move, according to season and shift with the places that we go. So to me, this is a way that the universe and our deepest Paleolithic, early human ancestors are teaching us how to be human and live in this earth, in this cosmos.
I'm having a hard time coming back from that, actually. I was really closed my eyes and was just with you, like going where you were going.
Right?
Woo, here we go.
Exactly. And let's do this. Let's, for all of us, those listening too, like let's take a breath and let's maintain the connection with the cosmos and with this bigger time scale while also being sitting here, right? Enthroned in our human bodies in this life. And because I think this is a part of us becoming real too. Like this is real humanness, to be here seated in our bodies on where we are on the earth in the cosmos, which is always right here. And that we have been alive in various forms for this entire time. And for us to really have this as part of our experience of who we are right now.
Yeah. I'm remembering that. Have you ever seen that flip book, The Powers of 10?
No, but I've seen kind of related things. So for sure. Yeah. For sure.
It's just like it was given to me in my Montessori training of like, it's like people sitting on a picnic blanket in Chicago. And then like you flip and it goes like way out by exponential by powers of 10, right? And then when you flip it the other way, it goes like way into the cellular level. And it's like, and it's really cool because like things on the macro and the micro are the same.
Right.
Like you see.
Right. Everything
like really
is spiraling basically.
Right. Exactly. But like what this is reminding me of like, oh, right. Like, if you're in this question about belonging and like what land do you belong to and what water do you belong to, and you zoom out, it becomes like a non-question. You're like, oh, I'm a child of the earth.
And
I'm
cosmos.
a child of these stars,
yes,
right?
Both.
Yeah, exactly.
We're the meeting of the two. We're the mating of the two. Yeah. Exactly.
Heaven and earth. Yes.
Exactly. And so that's why I say that, that orphanhood, I think is psychological to a certain extent. I think that we continue to insist upon our not belonging when we are capable of belonging right now. But we make it so about like humans and culture and like all this kind of stuff that has disintegrated to the point where it's not useful to us. And so, yes, that doesn't work, but that doesn't mean we can't belong. But we need to start at a different scale of magnitude, if you will. Right.
We have to like zoom out and connect on a more with the more ancient powers as well. Right.
It's a way bigger experience of who we are, both in space and time.
It's definitely the opposite of lonely making.
Right?
When you think about it like that. Yeah.
Totally. I know I live like by myself at the end of a lane in a big house. And, people used to just say like, do you get lonely? And I'm like, never. Like, I'm like in the universe, like the universe is right here all the time. Like I'm like with life. The only time I could really get lonely is like when I'm at like a party with a bunch of people, just like, presenting their personas. It's like, oh, then I'm never as lonely as that,
Totally. Yeah. It's when you're in a crowd of emptiness, when you're not being able to be real. Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah.
Let's, I want to talk about your potions.
Okay.
But before I do that, I'm actually going to you didn't know I was going to do this, but I'm going to do this.
Okay.
I am going to, read a list of your menu of potions or part of it.
Okay.
Because there's way too many, but I remember when I was doing research for the podcast and just like going through this list and being like, oh my goodness, what is this magical being? Who is this person who's doing this? Okay. So we're just going to start with I'm just going to go real quickly. We're just going to start with some hat in hand for experiencing respectful humility, renewal for replenishing and uplifting. Okay. Pretty average. Sharpening for honing mastery. Okay. Good. This for relaxing into this.
My favorite. Everyone needs this, right?
Grok. Okay. So we're still, okay, here we go. Naked presence for rooting more fully in subtle strength. restructuring, for riding the river, for feeling, knowing, and trusting what carries us along the river of time. Serpent moon, for deepening into a spine undulating dance of embodied vitality, right?
Yeah.
Showing up, for maturely entering the village and marketplace as we are. Here we go. Star wizards attuning, for meeting the vast dancing beauty of life with a generous spirit. Tiptoe through the tulips, for balanced presence in meeting newly emerging ways of relating. Wait, there's some more here that I wanted to read. Oh yeah, two wizards journeying, for cosmic adventuring and active relationship with the universe while living here on Earth. And of course, the time traveler special. So, and there's many, 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 many more. So yeah, I want to talk to you about potion making, and I want to, what I'm particularly interested in is your process around how did these, because my guess is this is some kind of sacred, holy collaboration with life and what is that you're doing here.
Indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to hear about it and how these come through you.
Sweet. And I want to share this and connect the connection with my ancestors, because of course it's there, even though I didn't know that when I began. Right. So, it's probably 20 years ago now that I started learning the stars. Before that, I didn't know any, just like everybody else. So I was like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to look up and have the slightest idea what I was looking at? And, but as I started to meet the stars, Jupiter was shining, and I just totally fell in love. I'd be sitting on my couch and I could feel Jupiter through the roof, just calling me out like a lover. What are you doing in there when I'm out here? And so, I got a little telescope, the little clock drive that moved at the speed of Earth's rotation, so I could look at Jupiter and track it across the sky, and I could actually feel new neural pathways in my brain just from looking at Jupiter and Jupiter's moons. And so I had this idea, I can make an essence of Jupiter. And so two things. One is I knew right away, I didn't want an essence of just Jupiter that would take us out. Because as you can tell from my speaking, I'm an oddly practical person for how cosmic I am, right? And so it was more how do we bring the Jupiter energy here? And so right away, I knew that I would make an essence of Jupiter, but I would also make an essence of a tree to bring the energy down and a rock to ground it. And that those three together ultimately became Jupiter juice. And so I actually got a glass that fit in the lens cap of my telescope. And I didn't just be okay, Jupiter float in a bowl of water, or I saw Jupiter once and I'm going to channel that into the water. I actually put water in a glass suspended over my telescope lens, pointed to Jupiter, and tracked Jupiter across the sky. So the actual photons that would have been going into my eye went into the water. And then I combined with a birch tree essence that I made and some ocean jade essence. And together they became Jupiter juice. And so ultimately I did each of the planets, the different planet, tree, and rock. And then I thought I would just keep going and, do star clusters but the universe had other ideas. And really I work at the behest of the universe. It's not about what I want. And so the essences started mating with each other and then essences of moments just started happening. It wasn't about I'm going to make an essence of this thing. It was a powerful moment that you could just feel. You know how it is, right? It's just wah. We've had a couple of them here on our conversation. And it was there would just be water there because I'm a big water person, of course, which is a part of why I have to follow the rivers. And so I would literally just gather water that had been present when this wah was happening and put some in a bottle. And there's alcohol that's a preservative so that the water is the holder of the memory of that vibe. It's like an energetic poem, if you will. And then we can ingest that, or I can just, sometimes when I'm teaching a class, I'll just literally dose the ground with the essence and everybody can feel it, because it's like one of our senses is vibes. Like we think like sight and smell and touch and taste and all that, but it's like feeling vibes is one of our fundamental senses, in my opinion. And, but not one.
Are you flirting with me right now?
Maybe so. Right? It's so sexy. Exactly. It's like making love with the universe basically all the time, and the universe making love with us all the time. And so, even just what you read, I know Serpent Moon, you were all about that one. I could feel that. Yeah. And so this is what happens. It's just like, it brings this aliveness and this caress, of the universe, like to us. And it teaches us how to belong, how to be present, how to embody, how to actually be loved, how to actually bring ourselves. It's like each one, it's a very subtle but distinct shift that it makes in our experience of our embodiment. And then I started using flavored liqueurs, because I don't know about you, but watered down brandy is just not something my body was like, oh yeah, let's have some more of that. So I used flavored liqueurs as the preservative, but that also enhances the experience. So our body says, yes, I would like some of this. It's also really important that when we take them, I just call it take a moment. It doesn't have to be like a 20-minute meditation. Better if it's not, actually, but to just take a moment to really be with it. Because we're so used to, in our culture, like, take a pill and it will do something to me, right? But these are different. This is like ingesting this and being with it and meeting it, so that energetic shift can teach us how to make that energetic shift in our life.
And I'm just curious if you have, like, what would you recommend for folks who want to get in contact with their star ancestor beings?
Well, gosh, pretty much any of them, really. Their star ancestors being, well, I mean, definitely Star Wizard's attuning, but in some ways that one's very advanced. So honestly, I would just say this is where we should start.
This is where we should start.
This is where we should start, because this is actually what's happening. And usually we're just fighting this all the time, trying to make like this our bitch, It's just like, right? It's just like, I'm bossing you around, and universe, I want this and I want that, and I'm going to make my goals, and I'm just going to trample everything in the path and discard everyone who doesn't meet my relationship criteria. And, just on and on and on. And so we're usually fighting this, And so I think really, just as the basis of everything, this is the place to start. Now,
okay, so we're starting with
this. Now, I also want to say, like, that I love ancestrally where I recognize now this comes from. And I'll say that as I ancestor track, as I do that research and really delve into a line of my ancestors, it's like I could feel them more and more. And at some point I can feel, to me, I experience it. It's kind of like a thread that like runs through my body or being. There'll be like places like a river in a way, like through my being. And it's like, as I feel them, I can feel them in me, like, oh yeah, that's where that capability of mine,
Yes.
I think we're so, again, psychologized and so pathologizing of our ancestors, and everybody wants to go like heal them and fix them, like as if we are all together, we're just going to go fix them, and then that way we'd be good. And it's like, well, let's just get to know them, before we go in there with guns blazing of let me like impose my maybe not optimal reality on you. And so it's like to just be there and feel that thread and feel that knowing and really honor like this way of being. And that can be, great ways. And that can also be, challenging, non-optimal ways. But in my experience, I usually kind of see like a capability that I have. And so on my dad's mom's side, they were one of the hardest to track down. And in part because they come from Ireland, and Ireland records are really tricky. But I was able to find some things, and they were actually apothecaries. And going like way back. And so they actually had like, they were like in the newspapers, you know, of like our business, and like one of them is selling like stomach elixirs. And I was like, oh my goodness, elixir makers, like, you know, an apothecary is right back there. And I could just feel it. Like, and even on like, she married a guy, and his on his line goes back to London, and they were color manufacturers. So really both of them were chemists, right? Which, you know, goes back to like alchemists and all of that. So it was like, that was one layer of just like, I can feel it. The other layer is on my dad's side. His mom is from Scotland. And actually, my mom is also super into genealogy, which is great because we geek out. And so she was like, I was just at a genealogy meeting, and they said we should get like recipes from our family and put a photo. And she said, so I'm going to do like Nana's shortbread, even though it's from my dad's mom's side. But she was from Scotland. She made Scotch shortbread. And so she kind of wrote that up. She asked me for photos. And so I added a little story in, because I was the first grandchild of, you know, my generation. And she taught me how to make the shortbread. And she passed when I was about 10. So I was pretty young. And I'll never forget, because it's basically like butter, flour, and sugar, you know? And, but the secret is that you knead it, you know, with your hands, and like the warmth from your hands, like makes it all, you know, melt together in this amazing way. But what she told me was, when you're kneading it, she said, you put all the love that you have for the people that you're making it for into the kneading and the shortbread. And I realized that was my first lesson in energy.
In magic,
right?
Yeah.
In energy and magic.
Yes.
Like that,
yes.
that this is real, and that you can do this. And so my grandpa always said, I was the only one who made shortbread as good as hers.
Yeah. I think it's so, grounding to trace those gifts, right? To trace those ancestral gifts, and to like see how it's like, oh, it's not just that I happen to have this particular affinity or particular talent or gift. It's like, oh, this is a way that I can feel connected to my people, right?
Yes.
I can do the things that they did. I can eat the foods that they ate. I can sing the songs. Oh, songs, by the way, we're going to move towards that in a second. Okay. I can participate in things that they did in order to feel that connection with them, to feel grounded in the love that still flows. Yeah.
Yeah. And also that it's like a way of me being me, of like recognizing more, like I am like building upon like all of their learning and experience and my own unique way, you know, and unique blend. And it helps me to recognize and understand myself. It's kind of trippy. I'm on my father's side. You know, on his mom's side, they're from Scotland, like mostly coal miners, you know, and rope spinners. And on his dad's side, they're from what's now Baden, Germany. And they're, you know, very much farmers. And those, my grandparents actually met at a servants' picnic. You know, they were like serving in Detroit, like kind of the, you know, people who, you know, built cars in the early days and stuff like that. So on that side, I come from servants and, you know, and the very, you know, much working with their hands in that way. On my mom's side, I'm the 4th generation woman to go to college.
Wow.
And so I'm this like unique mix of this like, you know, educated, privileged, and this like, you know, deep in the earth working. And it's like, I feel that in myself, like, and I honor and remember them both. And I understand myself better when I can recognize these skills and capacities, but also, you know, and this education, but also this like deep willingness and ability to do the work.
It's like that. And I think that that's true for each of us, that we are each the perfect confluence of these rivers of ancestral love, right? Of how it lands uniquely in each of us, and how we blend and alchemize those things into the potion that's us, right?
Exactly.
And into our life.
Right.
Yeah,
and what we're dosing
beautiful.
life with as us, like
Yes,
what do we
exactly.
bring and how do we bring it? What vibe are we kneading into the shortbread of our life,
All right. I want to ask you for a song, and I want to ask you first to just like tell us about the song, and then we'll hear the song, and then I want to talk about what the song means and where it comes from, and I know that you're writing a book that has around this song. So just tell us like the name of the song and just a little bit, and then we'll hear it.
Okay. So the song is called Kula Vuoti, and it's a Finnish folk song. It's a very old Finnish song that was certainly, and is probably still sometimes sung when the groom is bringing his bride and her family, like on like all decked out and on horses, and they cross the river to come to where the bride will be living. And the village is there to meet them, and the sister of the groom sings this song to the bride.
Great. So let's give a listen.
Kula vuoti uta kuta. Kula vuoti uta kuta. Nero pavano sentoa. Mir pavoti miovani. Mir pavoti miovani. No se sorsa sota masta. No se sorsa sota masta. No se ilman nosta mata. Ylene mata. Ole jalka porta hila. Toini poiki polisella. Astuhan hen askelila. Taputa tavinya loila.
So lovely. Thank you for that song. Super powerful. And just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the words of the song and also about this, how it's relating to this book project that you're attending.
Yes. This, it's funny. I it's kind of related to ancestor tracking in a way. I was studying with a guy named Martin Prechtel for a long while. And there was kind of a riddle, a personal riddle that came out of that. And so I was following the tracks of spoons, and which now I like teach carving. And this is like, over 10 years ago. So this is this way, just same with ancestor tracking or just riding a river or a riddle. It's like to connect it with our ancestors, right? And to just have this be how we live, basically. So anyway, I was following spoons, and I found these spoons, and they had like deer and bear heads, but they were from the Ural Mountains, like of Siberian pine, which only grows in the Ural Mountains, not in Finland. So that connects it to those Northwest Siberian ancestors of mine that had been speaking to me from way back. And they were in Finland. And so then I came across the Kalevala, which is like a collection of Finnish folk songs and stories. And I'm not usually that into epics, but there was something in it that just spoke to me. Like, I remember these, And so then they had the kantele. That was actually me playing the kantele and singing that song, which is a 5-stringed folk harp. It's a Finnish folk harp. And that harp is a part of the story that comes from a fish. So again, we're with the waters, right? And so I came across this song, Kula Vuoti, on the album Arctic Silence by Merja Soria. And it just it was haunting to me. I was like, I just loved it. I had no idea. It's in Finnish. It's not even modern Finnish. It's like old folk Finnish. But I was just like, I must have this song in my life. And so I bought a kantala and learned to play it and started singing this song. And then found like a dictionary, like a dictionary of old Finnish etymology, and started going like word by word, trying to even figure out what the song, because even the person I was with couldn't tell me that it was, oh, that's part of what they do for the wedding and the bride. Like she didn't even know that. And she's like a Finnish folklore person, And so I just started sorting it out, like word by word and layer by layer. And so even the first line is Kula vuoti uta kuta. And Kula is the village. And vuoti, it means kind of like awaits. But if you go into the etymology of vuo, it means like flow, like the river. Right. So we're back to the rivers. You see how it just all keeps coming back to the rivers. And so what I realized is that on a certain layer, and I'm a super word etymology geek, it's all about tracking the ancestors of the words that we're using. Like, what are we even saying? Could we actually be saying something amazing if we actually we're conscious of it? And so I recognized that another way of saying the village awaits is to say the village riverbeds. And then Uta Kuta is the new moon. And so it's basically saying like the village is here and is awaiting this bride who's the new moon. And so it's acknowledging the bride not just as a person, but as an expression of the natural world, right? As this generation, if you will, right? This cycle of the moon, and that the village is riverbedding this. And so then as she flows through the river and into this village and into this home, like she's bringing that flow, which just from one line was like life-changing. And I feel like I'm still learning from this. It's like, oh, this is something different than the pursuit of what I want, right? And so then the song goes on. That I just played a couple of the verses, but like in the next verse, it's kind of welcoming her as the duck and just kind of saying like, "Hey, duck, like leave off from rowing in the in the river, like kind of and rise up." And it says, "But don't hoist yourself up, just rise." And then the next verse is like step, like one step on the threshold and another across, like the steps of a goose or the noble little mallard feet. Right. And so it's just like inviting to like come in to the home and acknowledging like this threshold and it just, the verses go on. And so once I had sorted it out, what I realized is that I had been taught by following this riddle, this river, if you will, I had been taught to sing a welcoming song. And to me, that was profound. And I just realized that's what life was inviting me into, is to learn how to sing a welcoming song. And so over the last decade, really, I've been learning how to sing a welcoming song and learning how to pay attention to what is life inviting. And so this past January, and I don't know, probably everybody's noticed the last couple of years, especially since that big solar eclipse, especially for those of us in North America and the US, it's like it's been a change in time. Like it's, what was is no more, and things are shifting, and we don't quite know who or what we are, but it's like we're having to make changes. And so this past January, I was, it was kind of an important time in my life and lots of shifting. And I was like, oh, it just feels like, it's that time where you want to make like goals or intentions or whatever, but that just never feels right to me. Like even intentions, I know like intentions are supposed to be so good and everything, but it still feels so like what I want based and kind of bossing the universe around. And so I realized like what I really wanted to do was to really listen to what is life inviting me into, and how could I sing this invitation a welcoming song. And how could I recognize and write down and organize and story these invitations? And how could I live this year learning how to live these invitations? And so that's what I've done. And I actually opened and kind of had a class and a big group of people who went through, and some I've been doing like monthly calls with as we're learning to live our invitations. And some I've been doing sessions with. And now, the year is waning, and so I felt called to write a book that kind of lays out this process. But what was interesting is a friend interviewed me about the book. She was just totally in love with this inviting way of living. And she asked me like kind of where it came from, where I learned this or whatever. And I realized it was from this song and from this invitation from life. And so I've ended up using this song and the verses of the song in the first section of the book to articulate these kind of, each verse is sort of an invitation from life, and it's teaching us how to live and belong and really honor what life is sending our way, like to live, and what we're riverbedding, and for us to learn to sing a welcoming song. And this is a very different way of living.
Just praises for what you're doing and that way of being. It feels like a new old way of being.
Yeah, it feels, and that's the thing. It's like, who knows how long this song, has been sung, and these river peoples, and, it's praising her as different water birds, and, and the sun and the moon and different kinds of trees. And it's like, it's also for us to not just be about our human ancestry, but like, different of us have been, like related to bears and serpents and water birds and trees and all of this for us to belong in a real way. And it's not by us wanting to belong. It's about us singing the welcome and the praise and the acknowledging and the beauty of the life that is here, that is the life and the universe living is all happening. And it's like the only reason that we're not experiencing is because we're spending a boatload of energy shutting it out. And to learn to sing a welcoming song and to meet it and presence as ourselves.
Yeah, it's really changing the paradigm of one's life, right?
Yes.
To be in a receptive, reciprocal, and like creative exchange.
Yes.
With the energy of life, the energy of every single cell that's inside of us, the energy of everything, right? That there's like a, it's like the image I'm getting is like a breathing dance. Like it's like a back and forth. It's right. And it's just a different paradigm. It's just a completely different way of being than what capitalism teaches us.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Completely different.
It is. And that's what I'm basically writing about in this section, in this intro to the book, is just contrasting how we're taught to live, and we're taught to have this persona and get what you want and drive ourselves and, all these things contrasted with this, what I would consider a more natural way of being. And the learning of how to do this is available to us. It's present in the stories and the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not lost. It's just we're lost.
But we have teachers.
The natural world, the stars, it's all right here. It's all right here.
Li, I want to, because you're a teacher, and I want to make a little bit of space for you to just talk about how folks can study with you if they feel called.
Yeah, right now, what I noticed, because I'm following what's, inviting. And so I find myself mostly doing sessions with people rather than classes these days. I think partly because it just seems more this-like, if you will. It's like us and this moment and the depth of this. And so a couple of ways. One is I do ancestor tracking sessions, which I love. and where I just do 3 hours and we literally just go on ancestry.com and research your ancestors, and you learn how to do it as I'm showing you and building your tree in your account. And then I can also talk with people about like, okay, here's the name of a place. Go research this place. Oh, look, there's the river. I was just doing this yesterday. It's like, oh, what's this river? And it's like, and so that's one way to work with me. And then another is I do what I call super kind of a deep dive session. And it's a combination of astrology reading, but really kind of more of inviting you into this. It's like I have a capacity to really see who someone is and what life is inviting as the next layer of becoming present, and to really speak to that and invite that, and to teach people how to welcome that, and then to story that with astrology. And so that's kind of the deepest way to work with me. And then some people out of that do ongoing work with me. But right now, those are the biggest, deepest ways of what I'm inviting and welcoming.
And do you have a sense of, like what's the book? When will the book be available? Do you have a sense of that yet?
The book seems to want to be available about a year from now.
Okay.
But I do, and I'm glad you asked, but I will in all likelihood offer my inviting course and sessions combination in all likelihood, probably very soon, as we move from 2019 into 2020. And so it hasn't fully formed the timing of that yet, but I'm ready for a second round. And I know most of the people I've been talking with who did the first round, they're like, let's do it again. So, and I think it will be all the more rich because the book is emerging in this process. So this is also a way to work with me. And probably the best thing to do is to go to my website and sign up for my cosmic updates, which I send weekly-ish. And also, you can give a listen to my podcast, which is just through my website. But at each month, according to the months of this calendar that I make, I'm just talking about what's happening, the themes of what's happening in the sky and astrologically as a kind of an energetic weather forecast, if you will. And just speaking to like, how can we meet it well? Kind of like, what is this moment inviting? When are the, energetic shifts likely to happen? How do we like recognize them and meet them as an offering of learning something rather than like, oh, my life's disrupted and when will it get back to normal? It's like, what is life inviting? What's the shift? Let's bring ourselves to it. So that's probably the best way to just get to know a little bit more of my work, and also to be able to hear about inviting 2020 when it comes.
Awesome. And again, your website is stargazerli.com.
Yep.
Stargazerli.com.
Yep.
And so folks can find, and they can get your potions there, and they can find all things Stargazer Li there. So I really encourage folks to head over and check that out. Li, it's been really, you've tickled me and entranced me. And I feel so blessed really to have had this conversation with you. It's very nourishing. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to have such a conversation. Truly. Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. And I also have a new project, which is Wellcelium, which is an online school for transformative sex, intimacy, and relationship skills. It's launching later this year. And you should check us out on Instagram at Wellcelium, WELLCELIUM. And I'm Pavani, and I'll be back every full and new moon with Bespoken Bones, with more embodied goodness and ancestral wisdom.